Hey everybody, welcome to the 48th episode of Taps and Patience. I am AJ with Design the Everything, here with Harrison from Precision Ingenuity. Hi Harrison.
How we doing?
I'm doing all right. And can I start by saying something I forgot to say on the last podcast, which is if you are a small business that makes a physical product and or offers a service that makes physical products, such as being a job shop, and you would like a shout out on the podcast, send me a message. All boats rise with the tide. And I was going to set up a page on my website and charge you like 50 cents to do this, but I am too lazy for that. So just shoot me an Instagram message and we'll get you a shout out on the podcast just to help out the community.
That'd be fun.
So how you doing?
I'm tired and I'm probably going to have an early morning. What about you?
Same. Though, I don't know. I've been debating between late night or early morning. I might do late night tonight and then sleep in a little bit because I have some parts I need to get in the tumbler overnight.
Yeah. Yeah, that's when I go home for the day, I don't usually go back. So my shop is not right next to my house. So
yeah, it's both a blessing and a curse.
It is. It'd be nice because then I could go and run parts overnight and then it wouldn't be as bad, but it's also a curse because now I have to go all the way over there if I want to do something. So,
yeah. The other night I was serious, like I had parts that I think had like a 2-hour cycle time, and I was seriously considering setting an alarm for every 2 hours and just like waking up every 2 hours and changing out the parts. Mm-hmm. Then I realized that sounded awful and I chose to not do it. But I almost did it, and I could if I needed to.
I have done that before. When we were first getting going, I actually did a lot of 3D printing stuff and sold it. And so stuff would print for like 8 hours at a time, and so it would stop at like 2 a.m. or something. So I'd set an alarm, and I'd get up once to go start another one. So, but I don't do that anymore. So, is what it is.
I think I did it some when I was making branding irons on my Pocket NC. I would get up and change tools once or twice.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I haven't. I don't know. Maybe it's a good thing that the shop is 200 feet out into my yard because it does add just enough where I'm like, nah, I'm not going to get up in the middle of the night and do this.
Yeah. Which, speaking of which, I have thought that maybe this is a bad thought. That if I ever got to a point where I didn't need the Tormach anymore, instead of selling it, just sticking it in my garage in case I ever wanted to run stuff overnight from home.
Yeah,
I could just bring it home
terrible idea.
Set it up and let it go. That and I get to play with it on the weekends in my garage. So,
and that's when like good R&D happens.
Mm-hmm. So that could be fun. Who knows? It may happen someday. So, you had a little bit of an interesting hiccup this week. Do you want to talk about that at all?
Which hiccup should we start with? Some of the other earlier ones seem more minor now.
Okay. I guess we can do a build-up. Start with how this week has been going in the beginning and where you're at now.
So I guess there's really just been 2 hiccups. The first hiccup I was dealing with was my touch probe. My wireless one was just having some reliability issues. And I've been having some issues with it for a while now, but I feel like they had just gotten worse over the last week. I don't know if they actually got worse or if I was just finally getting frustrated with it more, or if I was running the parts where it mattered. I don't know. Maybe it's always been like this. But that sent me down a path of troubleshooting my new touch probe. And I'm going to start out with a disclaimer. I should have just sent the company an email, and I never did. And that was probably a mistake. But I did get it fixed. So there were a couple things going on. The first thing was that when you probe something, occasionally the probe would get stuck and it would stay on it would stay triggered for a second or two. And that would air out my machine and cause it to stop. The other problem I was having is that sometimes it would get some like flickering in when it went to probe. Like it would double or triple trigger on a touch.
Okay.
And both of those were just causing reliability issues with the probing. And so I don't know. I tried a bunch of things until I finally was like, do you know what? I'm just going to take it apart. and I took it apart and I was playing with it, and I realized that I could make the spring in it just a little bit stiffer by sticking in a spacer. And
Okay.
I did that. So I just took a piece of Ultem that I had laying around. There's basically a like half-inch deep hole that the spring stuck in on one end. And
Mm-hmm.
I cut like a quarter-inch piece of this Ultem and stuck it in there. And that fixed the sticking issue.
Okay.
So that was a win. That was pretty easy. I did have to take it apart, which is probably not a desirable thing to do to your brand new piece of metrology equipment, but I did, and it was fine. And then I had the issue of the double touches or the triple touches, and the other issue was it was flickering during rapids sometimes. Like the rapid would trigger it, and the stiffer spring helped with that. I would say got rid of 90% of the problems, but there was still like the 10% where it could happen still.
Sounds like it has a really weak spring if a rapid movement would trigger it. Because it's not even moving. It's the table that's moving.
Well, a rapid and Z.
Wow.
At either the beginning or the end of the rapid, it could trigger it. But yes, I agree. It needs a stiffer spring.
Yeah.
And so that's when I started digging into PathPilot and Linux CNC. And I went deep into the configuration files in the hardware abstraction layer, and I found the debounce settings. And the debounce settings were the amount of filtering was set to 10. That's 10 processor cycles, I believe, is how Linux CNC measures time. So whatever that is. But I was looking at a Linux CNC post, and in the sample code they provided, the debounce was set to 200 processor cycles. And so I changed it to 100. And that seems to have fixed all of my little like false triggers. It's just that little bit of debounce. I had to reset the probe diameter, redo the calibration bore thingy, and it changed by like a tenth or 2/10. But other than that, I haven't had a single error since those changes. So that's pretty good.
Awesome.
It took me longer to figure out how to get into the configuration files and find the right one more than anything.
And then so that was the major thing that turned into the minor thing. So
yes.
What happened next?
And so then, and I had a realization, which I'll get to, but I was machining the coins, and I finished machining the coins. I need to make coin stands too. I forgot we sold 25 of those. I should probably make those. And I started making them. They are pretty simple aluminum part, kind of like a Mayan pyramid. They're kind of stair-stepped. And you put in a bar, and it cuts 4 parts out of that bar, and then you flip them over and do op 2 on the backside. And so I ran like 3 different bars of it 3 times, and I went to go put in my 4th one, put it in, hit cycle start, and I happened to sit there and watch it, which is good because I don't always do that. And the spindle didn't turn on as the machine was getting close to the parts. And I was like, well, that's not good. And I stopped it. I figured it was the same issue that I had a couple weeks ago where the belt had kind of slipped up. And I opened up the hood that covers the top of the spindle and the drawbar assembly. And I looked at it and everything looked fine. It's like, okay, that's weird and worrying and not good. So then I was like, well, maybe the VFD has done something dumb. Maybe it's having a hard time communicating with the controller. And so I loosened the belt. I took off the belt that connected the spindle to the motor. And my spindle still did not budge in the slightest. It was stuck. And that resulted in me going down a rabbit hole. I called our inside man at Tormach and talked to him, and we got a case started. The spindle was technically sort of under warranty. They have like a tiered warranty where if it's 3 months, if you've been using it for 3 months, they'll just send you a replacement. And between like 3 months and a year or something like that, they'll prorate it. But I haven't had that spindle for much longer than 3 months. And they were like, we'll just send you a new one. Like, you've had enough problems with this. They'll send me a new one. So there's one in the mail. And they put one in the mail, technically this morning, I suppose. I talked to them like right as they closed last night. We missed shipping call, so it'll be here tomorrow, the new spindle. But as I took out the spindle today to get ready for that new one tomorrow, and I got it out just fine. I've done this before. It took maybe 15 minutes, the second time around. And I was like, you know what? I want to see inside here. I want to know what went wrong. And I failed to mention, Tormach did walk me through some troubleshooting steps. They were actually super helpful there. But it was like, well, spindle don't turn. There's not much troubleshooting you can do past that. And so I had the spindle out, and I was like, all right, I'm going to take the sucker apart. And I took it apart, came apart fairly easily. And it was like, well, all the bearings look good. I couldn't feel any play. Like, they seemed fine. There was no discoloration. Except I noticed on the inside of the spindle housing, there was a section of the inside that was pretty rough. And it's like, well, that's strange. And I happened to poke the nut that preloads the bottom bearings. It's kind of a castle nut that has some set screws in it to lock it in place. And that nut was completely loose. And the spacer between the bearings was free floating around. And so I think what happened is they didn't tighten the screws that hold that preload nut in place. And then that spacer got off center and loose and, jangled around until it kind of wedged itself in against the side of the housing. And that's how my spindle locked.
That doesn't jive with what I would think would cause it.
What would you think
personally
caused it?
So that spacer can't go anywhere because it's a very precision bore between the sidewalls and your bearings. Otherwise, you would have a spindle that was very wobbly on the inside.
The spacer is undersized, so it doesn't rub on the edges.
Yeah, but even if it moved, the outside of the bearings should be stationary. So there shouldn't be anything on those that would actually cause it to rub against the outer races. The outer races should be... That's how a bearing works. You have your inner races that are rotating, your outer ones that are stationary.
If it somehow connected, like if it moved enough where it was connecting the inner race and the outer race...
I don't think it can. I've taken those apart. There's no way it can touch on the inside or the outside. Just the way that they are.
I think
there's too big of a gap.
Like mine definitely can.
Huh?
It can definitely touch the outer wall.
Oh, it can touch the outer wall, but it can't touch where the bearings are at, and it definitely can't touch the inner one while it's in the machine. There's way too much gap. When that thing's off, it can slide way far over left and right. So here's my thought. Just my 2 cents on it. If your nut on top was loose and those thrust bearings began to separate, the thrust bearings, whenever you put them together, you can actually pull a thrust bearing apart because it's tapered at an angle. So if they're loose, my guess is your bearings started to come apart from the thrust bearings, and that's what caused the two halves to lock. So basically, your two halves began to separate, and then that bound everything up. And so by tightening everything back down, it forced the thrust bearings to push back together, and that way they're properly seated in their races. Because you can, when you're trying to separate those out, ask me how I know, you can separate the inner race from the outer race really easily because they're tapered, and they warn you about that. And that's why you have to make sure that you got that's why you have to make sure your arrows are pointing in the correct direction. That way you're pushing everything together rather than pulling it apart, because it'll come apart. So that's what I would suggest. And then one thing that I was sitting here thinking about, when you put your new spindle back together, earlier at the beginning of the podcast before we got going, you were saying that your spindle was a lot louder than it has been in the past.
Yeah. And I think my theory as to why is that I don't think I centered that spacer very well. And exactly, it might be hitting the outside or even just vibrating.
That's exactly what I was going to suggest. So I stuck like 4 pieces of paper around the rim and tightened everything together and then pulled those 4 pieces of paper out.
That makes sense. I I was thinking about taking it back off and just like setting it up in a V block with an indicator and just kind of tapping it until it got fairly centered.
Yeah. The paper method seems to work, and that's what I saw whenever I watched that video on um, VC Edge put
I
out.
should have finished that video.
Because at the very end, he did the paper method where he puts 4 pieces of paper. Because I think he said paper is approximately like 2 or 4 thou,
It's fourth
and by
thou, yeah.
spacing it around, it gives you enough clearance. So and one of my papers was really tight, or one or two of my papers was pretty tight, while the rest were pretty loose.
What did
So
you? So what goes around the paper? The bearings on the or the spacers on the inside. What's on the outside?
so I'm talking about the cap that holds the whole assembly together. So
Oh, not the spacer.
not yeah okay not the spacer, no, the cap, the bolts that you like that actually pull the core out of it. You got
Yeah.
those like 8 bolts that are right around the spindle
Mm-hmm.
nose. That black cap, you gotta put paper in there between the black cap and your spindle taper section on the outside.
I don't
Do you
think it's
see?
that. I think it's my spacer between the bearings because it was I think kind of visibly off center.
I
Um,
don't I
they
would.
they fixed that issue with the black caps on the newer spindles.
On
They
the newer
also
spindles
now
that,
come with a seal on the top, by the way, which is fun.
well, mine had the gasket stuff on it. Like I had to put gasket sealant in it again.
On the black thingy.
Yeah, because it
Um,
doesn't have a washer. It just had like a or like a liquid gasket that dries in place.
okay. Yeah, mine had a kind of cut rubber gasket thingy.
Yeah, mine was like it was like rubber that they had. It was like a black silicone bead, or but my guess is a gasket material, and it popped off, and so I just put some more red gasket material that I had around it, sealed it up. But I did have to space mine around the rim, um, and that made a difference. Like I could tell that if I hadn't done that, it would have rubbed, and that would have probably caused a lot of noise.
That's a really easy check. It could be. I mean, that'd be great because that means I don't have to take off the spindle again.
Yeah, because like
Um,
when I was putting everything together, and I don't know how easily yours went together or not, but taking it apart and putting it together, it was really easy to get it in and out of that sleeve. It really didn't take much force.
into and out of the
The core,
bearing
the
core
core out of
from
the out
the
of the.
yeah. It took a little bit of light tapping with a dead blow mallet, but I was by no means wailing on it.
But once it got moving, did it just stay moving? It was just breaking it free initially.
Once I retightened down that nut, yes, everything was fine
Yeah,
and
yeah,
recentered the spacer.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah. Yeah. You can, if you do decide to take it apart, I'd be curious. But
Again,
from
take it apart
how,
again.
yeah, from how I've seen it go together and come apart, I don't think that spacer being offset would do anything, because it's basically the exact same diameter and can only move by. If it was undersized, we're talking about undersized by like a thou or two, and I don't think that would cause any problems. The outer
Our
race.
spindles might be different
Oh, okay.
because no, it had I don't know a half inch of float back and forth.
Oh yeah, it does. I'm talking about the inner spacer to the outer spacer, like the actual ODs of them. Like
It
it's basically the spacers look like they're the bearing, the inner and outer race with just being hollowed out and no bearings in between the two. So it can float in there really good, but when it's pushed up in there, it's going into the same cylinder that the races are, and it's basically the same diameter as the races. So it can't float once it's inside. In fact, mine was so hard to get back together. I had to sit there and try to make sure I tightened everything down with it perfectly in the same spot, because I was ever so slightly off and I couldn't get it back in. And I had to like tap it. I had to find the high spot with like a straight edge. I had to like roll it around and find the spot where or the middle spacer was just a little bit high, and just try to tap it over with a dead blow to get it perfectly centered, so the housing would actually slide over it, because it was so tight.
see that's definitely not how mine was.
Okay.
Mine had a solid probably 100 thou of clearance on all sides.
Oh,
when
really?
you centered it. Yeah. And like I said, I just kind of eyeballed it. And I think I may have eyeballed it a little bit off.
Yours sounds like it's different because mine looks like it was made from a bearing. In fact, I think it had bearing markings.
Oh, really?
On it.
Yeah, mine's definitely not.
So it was like the exact same. Like they had ground it to be a match set, but you could still kind of see some of the laser markings where I'm pretty sure it was a bearing housing or bearing inner and outer race.
Huh. No, that's not mine at all.
That could be then.
So I do want to get nice bearings and put them in my spare spindle. Assuming I keep this machine for long. That's the question now. Is do I keep the Tormach past the pen basically?
Yeah.
Because let's say I get an X7, later this month. I would have 6 months of payments on that are only $99 before they go up to, I don't know the exact number, but it'll be about $1,000, maybe a little bit less. And then, the difference between a new style and like the Tormach I have now is really only another $400 a month or something. And so I could replace the Tormach with another style for $400.
So,
and then I could get the X5.
Is there any way could the Tormach micro arc work on a style? Like, could you wire them together? Is there anything special about the Tormach 4th axis that would keep it from working with a style?
It would all be, integration. And the documentation on the LNC controller isn't necessarily the best, but I don't know. I don't see why not.
I mean, if you could find a way to make it work in the 4 months while you have the $99 payments, because I think when you buy the 4th axis, it comes with the stepper driver, right?
I bought mine secondhand,
but it doesn't have a 4th axis wiring. By default, the Tormach doesn't, correct? Like you have to put all that in.
Yes, I bought a just Amazon stepper driver and wired it in.
Yeah, and so it just goes off of like step and direction or something along those lines.
Yes, it's a stepper driver, step and direction.
So I would imagine that if the style has a similar type of interface where it can just do step and direction, it'd be real easy to move that over.
That's a good point. I hadn't considered that.
So then you could make that work for a while.
Yeah, and with an X5, it's kind of a moot point because that machine's so small. But since I'm going, I think I'm going to go X7 now.
Yeah,
that becomes a good possibility.
Yeah, but that I would probably recommend that if you could find a way to make that work. Keep your 4th axis when you sell your Tormach. Integrate it into the style, and then just end up with 2 styles. An X5 and an X7.
Yeah. Or I could even just get the new, like when I get my second style, if I get a second style, I could just get it with their 4th axis.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't really feel the need for a 4th axis. I don't use mine that much.
Then I would just keep the Tormach. Like, there's no need to buy something else if you can hack it together and make it work in a style.
Yeah,
and that stops you from having to hang on to the Tormach, and you're not going to use it very often. All the more reason to try to hack it together and get rid of the Tormach.
That's a good point. Yeah, because I basically get 6 like grace period months where
it's really dark in here. I forgot.
It is very dark in there. I basically have 6 like grace period months where it doesn't matter if I have the Tormach or not. And if I were to, and so I could play with trying to get it hooked up or not, or sell it, or that's a good point. I think once I have the style in here, I will be good on production capacity with the style plus the Tormach for probably a year or 2.
Yeah. And I think your Sile, if I had to guess, would become your production machine, and
Oh,
your
yeah, yeah,
Tormach
yeah.
would, and your Tormach would become your prototype machine.
And once the Tormach is in prototype mode and it's not running 80, 90, 100 hours a week, I think it's not going to have these reliability issues.
Yeah, because
And plus,
the Tormach is a good machine for what it does. Although the Sile value makes it a lot harder to recommend to people, I
yes,
think.
it does.
Um, but it's still a great machine for what it is. Like I just got done, and that's something that I think I go on a roller coaster with Tormach so often, but it's building parts better than I've ever had it make parts since I've done this most recent run through of tightening everything up and fixing everything. So I don't think I've ever gotten parts this good off of it since I've owned it. I think it's better than new in a lot of ways, but at the same point, it's still missing a lot of stuff that I think the Sile has.
Yeah. I will say, and this is a huge thing in the favor of Tormach, especially if you are just starting out. Their support and their parts, like, they're fantastic. You can get any part on the machine you want in, a couple days or have it overnighted for some extra money. And you
Mm-hmm.
can get someone on the phone who will walk you through it, is very knowledgeable. With Sile, it sounds like it's a little bit hit or miss in both departments. Parts may take you a long time to get, and finding the right person to talk to sounds like it can be difficult.
Yeah, Tormach's got their game down in terms of customer service and community. I mean, like I'm not trying to knock the Tormach because it is a great machine. Um, the thing that I think we're getting to a point is where we're outgrowing the Tormach for what it's
Yes.
designed for.
Yep.
Um, I've seen people make amazing things on it, and I've made some pretty amazing things on it. So it is more than capable of making very good parts. It's just I'm to the point now where an industrial machine makes sense because I'm building an industrial company. So it's time to move up the stack. Because
Yeah.
I mean, look at like Servin Solutions. I
Yep.
mean, they started out with a Tormach 440, and now they're up to 2 robo drills. They couldn't grow as fast as they were, or as much as they had they stayed with Tormach the whole time.
Yeah. I
So
think if I were to start it over and I was, back in college or whatever, just coming up with ideas and making physical products, and I was writing out a business plan for the next 5 years or whatever, I think my bootstrapping plan would be start with something like a Shoreline and then move to a Tormach 770 and then go to a Sile. If somebody was asking me for advice on machines, that's what I would say, because
yeah,
the Shoreline or whatever, you can do basically anything to them. You're not going to hurt the machine. Like, it's a good way to learn. The Tormach 770, I think, is in a good place of being both like cheap and compact and easy to run, but like you aren't paying industrial machine money expecting an industrial machine. Whereas the,
it, it,
the
it
1100 MX kind of feels like that. Like, it's kind of industrial, like low end industrial machine prices, but it's not an industrial machine.
that and the 110 outlet versus 220.
Yes. And the easier ability to get the 770 like into a basement or whatever.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and then and then the Sile, you know what you're doing CNC wise, and you're stepping up into a industrial machine, a light industrial machine, but still an
yeah,
industrial machine.
yeah, yeah. I would agree with that.
So
That makes sense.
I took a couple extra steps in there, but that's what I would recommend to people.
Yeah, yeah. So okay. Well, I'll go into a little bit about what's going on in my world. I am incredibly stressed right now. I have work that is piling up, and it's piling up because I lost a week of work because my machine went down.
Sounds about right.
Not like my machine couldn't keep making parts. Like the Tormach didn't go down because it gave up the ghost or something went wrong. Stuff has been going wrong, and I've just been putting it off.
Yeah.
And I finally got to a point where I had to address everything, and so it turned from like a quick, oh, I'm going to do this, to just tighten everything up to get this job, to, well, I've already torn it apart this far, so might as well go ahead and do a whole maintenance deal on it. and because I don't really want to put it all back together and then tear it all back apart in 6 months or less because I need to. So that put us behind at a time when we don't need to be behind. So that being
What
said,
what
I'm
took
making.
so sorry? What
Go
took so
ahead.
long on that? Because it was just thrust bearings and spindle. That's like a day.
Yeah. So what happened was I started tearing it apart end of Tuesday, and at that point I didn't realize I needed thrust bearings,
Hmm. Oh, and they
and
had to be delivered.
so when I found out on Wednesday morning, because I started tightening the gibs and was doing a bunch of stuff, and I couldn't get my tolerances down. And I'd been on the phone with Tormach a bunch, and I slept on it. When I came in the next day, I found out that my thrust bearings were bad, and so that's when I put it all back together. Or that's when I told Tormach, or I called Tormach and placed an order for some thrust bearings. And so at that point, I started disassembling the spindle, and I got that all disassembled and put back together. And then once that was back together, then I had to redo the Saunders plate because I'd taken it off. And so I cleaned up underneath there and did a whole bunch of stuff to it, got it re-put back down. Then I changed out the thrust bearings. And then by the time I got that done, that had eaten through the Thursday. And I spent most of Friday breaking in the new spindle bearings.
Okay.
So by the time it was all said and done, it was basically Sunday. So I went from Thursday through Friday, or Tuesday through Friday. So I lost 4 days, basically 4 or 5 days of production because when I came in on Sunday to try to get some stuff done, it was working at that point, but I ended up losing another day or two to some other things that were not directly Tormach related, but kept me from running parts, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. So, all told, I'd say I lost at least a week of work through the whole process. So,
Yeah. Man, it's tough when you only have one spindle. Well, one mill spindle in your
yeah,
case.
yeah,
Which I guess is
never.
a very good argument for not selling the Tormach.
It is. It is. I don't think I'm going to sell the Tormach until I have two spindles to replace it.
Yeah.
So
Two
I need
spindles to
one
replace it.
I need one spindle, and then I need another spindle, and then it'll get replaced. So
Oh, yeah. The two spindles. I understand now. Um,
so when I buy my next machine, and then I get to a point where I can buy another machine, that's when the Tormach will go. So,
yeah.
but yeah, so got a lot going on, but it's good because if I can get everything done, we'll be making a lot of money for the stuff that we currently have. We
That's good.
currently have a lot of jobs in queue that'll pay very well, and that we've already paid off all the material and stuff in. So like at this point, we've spent a whole bunch of money and haven't got paid for anything yet. And so it'll be good when we start getting paid for all the stuff that we've taken on. And that seems to be how it goes in the job shop world is things kind of come and go in waves. And at the beginning of the wave, you have no cash because you're just buying so much stuff. And then all the jobs are due at basically the same time and you have no money, but you have a whole lot of money that could be potential. You just got to get it out the door.
Yep.
And so it's kind of the job shop wave. And then once you get all the jobs done and you start getting your paid, you're like, oh man, I feel like we're doing really well. And then the next job comes in and all that extra cash that you thought you had, it's gone.
It's kind of the opposite of doing Kickstarters. Whereas
Yeah.
Kickstarters, you're like, woohoo, I have all this money up front. And then it
Yeah.
slowly dwindles away and you start panicking. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's opposite. It's the inverse Kickstarter.
Yep.
So yeah, that's fun.
But you'll get caught up. Just takes
Yeah,
time.
we'll get caught up. It won't be the end of the world. I'm just probably gonna have to go in at like 4 a.m. tomorrow.
Yeah.
Oh, I
Well,
really
we
need
can
to
keep
get
this
caught up on.
short.
Yeah, I really need to get caught up on some things because I have I have a job that technically needs to be done tomorrow. and I have a tool coming in for it at 10 a.m. hopefully to finish it up, and then it's got to go to anodizing, and then it's going to be behind because of that. But I think my customer's going to be fine with it. I was really up a creek because I normally takes 2 weeks for anodizing, but I lost a week, and then the customer had made this. Okay, let me ask you a question. I got thinking about this job. Have you heard of a PG9 thread?
No.
Yeah. So I was making some an electrical enclosure for a customer, and the last time they had me do an MPT, a 3/4 inch MPT,
Uh-huh.
but the drawing calls out for a PG9 thread. And this is the second time I'm making the parts, and they asked me to make it per the print.
Mm-hmm.
And as I was in the middle of making the parts this week, I started looking at that and going, what the heck is a PG9 thread? I've never heard of this.
What is a PG9 thread?
Look it up on Tormach. Or not Tormach, on McMaster. McMaster is the only place I've been able to find a tap for it. I cannot find it anywhere else. It's some sort of an electrical connector thread. It's something weird. I have no idea what it is. But it's like a 1/2 inch threaded hole, but it's like a metric. It's like a metric size with a American thread cut.
Interesting. Yeah,
So it's called
McMaster calls it European conduit thread.
Yeah. So it's got like, I think it's like a 12 millimeter hole with like with like an 18 threads per inch, something like that.
Interesting.
So like, I don't know in particular what exactly it is. I'm trying to figure it out. I can't find anywhere online that'll tell me the pilot hole size it needs to be. So at least from the Googling I've done so far.
0.5468.
I think that's the tap size, that's the OD of the tap.
No, that's what McMaster specifies as the drill size. 35/64.
Okay, then that's conflicting with some of the other websites I found, because I found stuff all the way from 13 millimeters to
drill bit right there. It says it right there.
Yeah,
it says it on the drawing too.
Okay, but go. Where is the
problem solved? McMaster solves everything.
I could have swore there was somewhere else that I was looking, because I was looking at multiple websites at the same time, and maybe that's what confused me. But when I looked it up on other places, I've had 3 different drill sizes from 3 different websites that I found, and they've been off by like a millimeter each. Like, one of them was like 13 millimeter, one of them was 14 millimeter, one was 15 millimeter, and they all
millimeters a lot.
I know. And so that's why I wanted to get it physically in hand before I drilled out the hole size, so I could actually measure the tap and make sure what it actually is, because different websites have said different things.
Interesting.
So,
and don't break your $80 tap. That's not fun.
Yeah. And I don't really want to tap it in the Tormach, but I don't really want to tap what would it be? It would be 20 holes by hand with it.
I don't know. It might be worth it.
So, and it's a plug tap, and I'm going into a blind hole. So, at least, let me rephrase that. I'm going into a blind hole because of the order of operations I'm going in. Because the part it's going to be a box, and it's going through the wall of the box, and I'm machining through the end of the box before I hollow out the middle, because I don't really want to stand it up and have it vibrate, because it'd be like 9 inches tall, but have like no support.
what if you just drilled the hole, did everything else by hand, or did everything else and then tapped it by hand when the wall's thin?
I might could do that. I also thought about just tapping it part way and then hand tapping it the rest of the way. So like putting like 3 threads in, because it is the way it's modeled. It's going to have to tap like about a half inch, because it in the area where it's going in, the box comes out just a little bit to give it some more thread engagement. But all this area around it is really thin. Is the problem?
Could you thread mill it?
Yes, if I knew how to, if I had a gauge that I could compare it with or something I could compare it to. I thought about doing that because I do have thread mills. I have a thread mill that would work, but it goes back to, does Big Master tell you the threads per inch?
It's 18.
That's what I thought. That's what I've been going off of. But like I said, I've had conflicting things from other places. So until I get it in hand, I haven't really wanted to do anything yet.
Yeah. I would thread mill it.
I would like to. So what I might do is I might thread mill it and then use the tap as a sanity check.
Yes. Yeah, use it almost like a gauge.
Yeah.
Or even thread mill it slightly undersized.
Yeah.
Yeah. That makes sense.
And then just use the tap to hand feed it in. So, be a very expensive gauge.
I don't know. Thread gauges of that size can get rather expensive.
True. But that's what I'm looking at doing. I got 20 holes to do. Thread milling is the way I would like to do it. It's the way I did the NPT tap, what it was last time. I just did it as a... And the nice thing about the NPT tap was because it's tapered, it's going to stop at some point. So I would just rerun it and open it up. And as I opened it up, I could see how far the grommet would go in until it bottomed out. And so I just sized it down until it basically met up to the face of the part. And so the threads were getting tight right when the face was matching. So I could match the two together. So, but can't do that with these.
Yeah.
So anyways, that's my my fun time tomorrow.
I think you'll be fine.
Yeah, I'm
not
a
weird tap. Otherwise, it's stuff you've all done before.
Yeah, it's not. It's the problem is not having proper information and trying to get it figured out last minute. I'm probably making it harder than I should, but trying to find an authoritative source on it other than what I can scour through multiple different websites, I haven't really found anything. Yep, that's the other chart I found.
This very formal looking one.
Yeah. Because go back to that. Because see, that one says
14 millimeter tap drill.
14 millimeter tap drill. What did Big Master say on that?
It was a English conversion. I bet that converts to 14.
You can try it.
Yeah, 14. It's probably the nearest imperial size.
Yeah. But see, I've seen 15 as well.
I wouldn't believe those ones.
Yeah. Anyways, it'll be fine. It'll work. It's just been super stressful, and it's just stressful because I'm under the gun and I don't really want to scrap these parts because they're really expensive. So
now this isn't just the British name for an MPT tap, is it?
It's non-tapered, for the best of my knowledge. There you go, BG. What's that chart say? It's a little fuzzy on my end.
This one does say a slightly bigger through hole. It says 15.4. Interesting.
See?
Oh, wait. No. It says through hole, not tap hole. That's a clearance hole.
Oh, okay.
Which that checks out.
Okay. And maybe that's what I'm seeing. It's such a wide variation because some of the connectors have a thin nut that goes on the back side to tighten it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that could be some of the problems I'm running into.
Yeah, that sounds right to me. I bet it is.
That makes more sense. Because like I'll ask, what hole size for a to tap a PG9, and they might be giving some of those websites I've been looking at might be giving me a clearance hole, and I just didn't realize that.
Yep.
That
Uh,
makes a whole lot more sense.
they definitely are different threads, which is sad.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's weird that they're 80-degree angle instead of 60-degree like every other thread in existence.
Oh, then that means I can't threadmill them.
Yep. Yes, it does.
Yay!
Well, at least we figured that out.
I wonder if I could threadmill it and then hand tap it because it would open it up those last little bit.
Probably. I don't see
That
why
might
not.
be that might be worth doing just to make my if I'm gonna hand tap them, just do a light threadmill.
Make sure they go in their square and most materials removed.
Yeah, that might be the way to do it because I don't really want to power tap this with my mill. Like I don't know why,
It's a
but
big thread.
it just makes me very nervous. Because I don't really want to blow up a part.
Yeah.
So, and these are large enough that it'd be really hard to break it by hand, especially once I have it all the material removed on the backside.
Yeah.
So, I might have to do that. It's making more and more sense. So, what else? Anything else going on in your world?
I remembered something I forgot to mention earlier.
Oh, okay. Let's hear
So,
it.
gosh, I've so lost track of time. I don't remember if it was this week or last week. Oh, yeah, it would have had to have been last week because it was on Thursday. Um, there is a large event in Indianapolis called Gen Con, which is like the gaming
Oh, yeah.
convention. And Scott and I went together on Thursday, and then he went Friday and the weekend as well. But so we went on Thursday, and we walked the floor, and it was fun. And we ran into there was a booth by BackerKit, which is the people we used for our Kickstarter survey.
Mm-hmm.
And we used BackerKit for all of our major Kickstarters. And we talked to them for a bit, and they're like, "Yeah, we're having an open house later. If you get tired of the crowds, come visit us." It was at a brewery, just kind of 5-minute walk away. And we're like, "Yeah, sure, we'll come by." And we we hung out for a bit. Then we got there, and it was Scott and I, the founder of BackerKit, the guy in charge of customer service, the COO, and there was one other person. Oh, the person in charge of their marketing, like the group that helps companies advertise.
Mm-hmm.
And there was one other BackerKit customer there, but it was just like we basically had the whole management team of BackerKit to ourselves, and we sat and we
Wow.
talked for like 3 hours. Some on topic about design the everything in BackerKit, some off topic. But I mean, first of all, I had a blast. I very much enjoyed the conversation. Like we were very well aligned with the BackerKit people. Like they were just cool guys, and we're kind of in the same worlds. But then we also talked business some, and we talked about like their new crowdfunding campaign or platform they're doing. We talked about their advertising programs, and we may use BackerKit a little bit more heavily in the future,
Well, that's
and
good.
they may be able to help us out a little bit. So that was it was not intended as a business trip, but then the highlight of that day was definitely hanging out with the BackerKit people.
Did you get any inspiration for products or see anything else business related that would interest you?
Um, we looked at meeples because we have those metal meeples, And
Mm-hmm.
I may reach out to one of the companies that sells them and see if they want us to make them some at a production scale.
Okay.
Um,
That'd be cool.
Other than that, not really. Um, I guess it was mostly stuff that we had seen last time. And there's kind of the checklist of things that we could make. And that checklist of things that we could make in the gaming industry hasn't really changed. It's basically it's game pieces, dice, um, and then like accessories for board games such as your deck defender would have fit in really well at Gen Con.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
as well
Which
as just like dice cases and rolling tray dice rolling trays and that kind of thing. Not the other fly.
it's funny that you say that. I had a guy come into the shop the other day, and he was a mechanic, and he actually got kicked out of Las Vegas at one point because he was he knew a lot of magic tricks and was gambled, and I think he could count cards and a few other things that kind of got him banned. He said that we live right next to Oklahoma, and there's a casino right on the border, and he said he went in there one time. He said I walked in, and before I made it through to the inside, he said I already had security that were like, "Excuse me, sir, what are you doing here?" And he's like, "Oh, you guys know me?" And they're like, "Yep." He's like, "Well, I was just coming here to get some lunch," and they're like, "Well, you'll have to turn around." He's like, we won't even let you get lunch. He's like, "Okay." So, but anyways, regardless of that interesting individual, we were showing him our playing card case, and he thought they would do really well out at Las Vegas. He's like, "Do you guys sell this at more places?" I was like, "Have you been advertising?" I was like, "Well, we've sold some online." He's like, "You need to go to Vegas."
Yeah, you have a good product. You just I don't think I've learned how to sell it yet.
Yeah, yeah. And I think I can get like what I know now compared to what I knew when I designed it. I bet I could get my price per piece down a lot more, especially if I had a bigger, faster machine. Because when I originally did all the pricing, um, my biggest cost was anodizing and machine time. And
Yes.
to put it in perspective, it was 30 minutes to an hour on the Tormach. I think it's been a while since I've run this program, but I think it was about I might have got it down to 30 minutes. Might be closer to 40. I know it was over an hour at one point. And then I did a whole bunch of optimizations, and I don't remember if I got it down to 30 minutes or less, or if I was still over that. I think that was my goal, was to try to get it down. But regardless, when I came up with the original pricing, I was pricing it where the company could survive if I sold every single one of them that I made per week. And then that would just barely scrape us by if that was our solo product. And that's probably not how you want to release a business or start a business or do a price of product. But especially if you only have one product, which we did at the time. It was our first Kickstarter. We learned a lot from it. But had I had multiple machines making that and I could get the price down, I think they'd sell like hotcakes. And the problem is that I can make a lot higher hourly rate doing job shop work than I can with that particular product.
I don't think getting the price down is your problem. I think if you were to sell them to the right people, you could sell them for as much or more than your current price.
Probably. And so much of my profit margin was eaten up originally by material, which I think I can get way lower now because I found some new contacts. I think originally it was like $15 in material per case
For one of those?
Yeah.
Oh, that's wildly too expensive. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then anodizing was anywhere from the cheapest I ever got them done was like $6 or $8 a box, and the most expensive was over 15 a box. So I was over $30 just in those two expenses, not including my time, machine time, and all that other stuff that goes into it.
Yeah.
So
Now you could just Cerakote them.
Yeah, except
The issue you would run into is your big selling point is that they're metal, and as soon as you Cerakote them, they don't look like metal anymore?
Well, not only that, I would rather anodize them over Cerakote, um, because it can be a dipping process and can be done a lot faster. Cerakote would be cheaper in smaller batches, but if I was going to try to sell them at a large scale like I was going for, anodizing would ultimately be way cheaper per piece.
Yeah. Speaking of which, I did something that I swore I never would.
Uh-oh.
We've started building an anodizing setup.
Really?
For titanium only. With the reason titanium only is that you can anodize titanium with basically any conductive fluid.
Mm-hmm.
I think you could literally do it with salt water. We're doing baking soda water.
Yep.
But there was a couple driving factors. One is the not for climbing carabiners are very difficult to powder coat. And now that we have the not so tactical carabiners, which will hopefully ready to be for sale on our website soon, like we have a bright color option, and the not for climbings, which are cheaper, we can now offer a boring color option for people who want to go that route, and they'll be much quicker and easier to make. Then we also have some things like the key rings, which are just so low value that powder coating them isn't even remotely worth it. Plus, holding them during the powder coating process would be very difficult. And with anodizing them, you just hook it on a wire, dip it, and you could do 500 in an hour or whatever.
Yep.
So,
just makes sense.
We went to the dark side. We've just done some experimentation at this point. We did buy a 120 volt power supply. My old one was only 36 volts. And like we've played with scrap. That's basically as far as we've gotten. We need to actually start building processes and like figure out how to actually prep parts for powder coating better.
Yep.
For
anodizing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We may need to do an etchant to prep it. Stupid flies. I did anodize my tactile turn pen that I've had for years.
Ooh, I like that a lot.
It's very subtle, which was not actually my goal. But it looks decent. I'm not thrilled with it, but it's good enough.
I like it.
But that's what convinced me. I think I need to etch them because I think those colors should have been brighter than they are. And I think the etching gets you there. So, unfortunately, I may have to do one nasty chemical.
Yep. We'll see. I'm looking forward to this because I've always thought you should anodize titanium.
It's literally in the Better Keychains design philosophy, like our written standards, that we don't do anodization.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm breaking one of our founding rules. I don't mind for Design the Everything products, but the Better Keychains kind of have their own style. And
speaking of Better Keychains, do you have any of your products that are getting close to launch on that side?
So we're still working on that stupid not so tactical Kickstarter. We've almost been done for like 3 weeks now.
Oh, really?
And yeah,
because you only had like 40 hours or 80 hours, whatever it was, like 2 weeks ago.
Part of it was we lost a lot of time to Gen Con. Like I lost a whole day and Scott was gone for 2 days. And then Scott was also out for, he was out, he was out today because his tooth needed a root canal. And then tomorrow he's actually getting his root canal. And so that was another day where I was planning on getting things finished. And then also we keep making all of the not for climbings for the Kickstarter. And then we keep selling them before we can ship them.
Oh, really?
Yeah. We keep selling them on online orders. And
well, that's a good problem to have.
I mean, it is a good problem to have, but it means I can't finish the stupid Kickstarter. We needed 25 of them. I made like 45 of them, and now we still need 25 of them for the Kickstarter. So
for the not so tactical.
Yeah. And I needed the generative scales, and the um, engraving on those takes a long time. And the other day, so I set it up to run overnight, and the tool breakage detection after like the second tool before it did the long engraving hit a chip and aired out.
Oh
And so we
no.
lost a whole night of machine time. And then, because that's the dumb fixture that I can't take off the machine when it has the parts on it, we basically lost that whole day finishing up that pallet.
Do you know how to set up the Tormach to send you a text message when it errors out?
Yes and no. I know how to find out how to do that.
Because I think that would be very, very beneficial for you.
Yes, it would. Well, I don't know. It still would have happened at like 1 a.m. and I probably wouldn't have gone out.
Yeah, but if you woke up and checked your phone at any point, like happens to me every once in a while, you probably would have saw it, and then who knows, you might have got up a little earlier or something.
Yeah.
Or if it happened as early as you're saying, it might have happened before you went to bed.
It might have. I'm not sure. Now, what I could have done is I have a webcam set up. I could have just looked at my webcam. But that's something I have to actively do, not something that comes to me. But yeah, there is a way to set up Tormach to send you texts. I ran across it. It's a little piece of Python that you stick on your controller. I was digging around in the controller the other day, and I actually found out it has that technology built in. It's inherent.
Oh, it does?
Yeah, I just have no idea how to configure its built-in stuff.
Interesting.
But there are Python codes for sending texts from your machine.
So when you're digging into the code, how are you doing that? Walk me through that.
So basically, you can escape the PathPilot interface and get into the normal Linux interface. Like, just, it's a computer.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's like a Chrome web browser and everything built in, and you do that by holding Alt Shift when you shut down the computer or start it up.
Okay.
And then you just go poke it in the file system. It's all in Python, which is like a non-compiled software. So you can just read the code right there.
So can you launch it, PathPilot? Like if you're on a desktop, does like PathPilot show up as like an icon or something?
There's probably a way, but the easier way is just to reboot the computer, then it pops back up.
Gotcha. So when you do that, do you restart your machine? Do you just flip the main breaker, or do you actually just turn on and off the computer?
The easy way for me to do it is I just go unplug the 110 volt power to the machine.
Oh, okay.
So
that's fair.
Yeah, I can get to my controller and hit the button. But this is another kind of weird thing about my machine. Oh, I left the air on the laser. Sorry.
You're good.
I was wondering why my air compressor has been running so much today. It's because I left the air on the laser. Anyway, I forgot what we were saying. That completely derailed me. What were we talking about?
Python on the controller, restarting the machine.
My machine has this weird issue where I believe the connector between the hard drive and the motherboard in the controller is finicky. And if you move around the controller too much, every now and then you'll go to boot PathPilot and you'll just get stuck in a BIOS screen.
Oh, fun.
And then you have to take apart the controller, unplug the cable, plug it back in again. It's happened to me like 4 times since I've had the machine. And so I just never, ever touch the controller. It's inside that little like cabinet base thing. Mm-hmm. And I just never, ever open that door, and it's fine.
Gotcha. Oh, I just remembered something. Speaking of bugs and weird things that happened. On Sunday this week, I was doing a little work at the shop trying to catch up on some things. And I was setting up the Tormach to run some parts. And all of a sudden, my drawbar solenoid started firing.
Huh.
Out of nowhere.
Over and over again, or just like...
it was turning on and off, and it would fire, and then it wouldn't, and then it would hold on, and then I'd push the button, and it would release, and then it would randomly start firing like a few seconds later. I figured out what it was though.
Button got jammed up / dirty / wet.
Kind of. So, what did you do with the wire for a foot pedal?
I don't have a wire for a foot pedal.
Oh, you don't? My tool changer has a wire for a foot pedal. So you can foot pedal actuate the drawbar if you wanted to.
I know that's an add-on item. I don't think mine has a wire though.
Mine has a wire, and it's short enough that I can't find a good spot to put it. And so it's dangling in the back of the machine, and it got wet and like some chips in it or something, and it was just barely short circuiting.
Yeah.
So it was just started randomly firing. And it's like 6 or 12 inches long. Like, it's really short, and you can't stick it on the outside of the machine through like one of those holes because it's too short.
Can you stick it into the ATC controller?
No, because it's sealed. It's going through a grommet to the outside. I'd have to pull the grommet out and like pull the wire all the way back into it, and then I'd have to find something to plug the hole to keep water out of that area. And so I ended up just shoving it beside all the solenoids in that little pocket area.
Yeah.
So
that's really hilarious.
I almost took a pair of pliers and just clipped it off.
Yeah, that maybe is the route I would have gone.
And I still might. It's just been. Anyways, yeah. I've dealt with that wire several times. This is the first time it's done that.
Yeah.
But I just, yeah.
This reminds me of the time back when I was working maintenance for Chick-fil-A, and I got a call to go into the store because they were having problems with the breaker. Or no, they were having problems with the freezer. That's what it was. The freezer wasn't working. And I walked in. I went to the breaker panel. Breaker was flipped. It's like, okay, flipped on the breaker. Breaker immediately flipped back off again. Looked around. There's the end of an extension cord sitting in a bucket full of water. I removed the extension cord from the bucket of water, unplugged the extension cord, turned back on the breaker. Everything works fine.
Oh my goodness!
If you put an extension cord in a bucket of water, you're going to have problems with everything else on the same circuit.
My guess is that was a kid who was trying to get out of work that day or something.
I think it was a kid who just wasn't paying attention, and
that could be too.
Extension cord fell off the shelf, and yeah.
That's funny. Like, anyways, I was freaking out for a little bit. Like, I started tearing everything apart on it,
looking for the gremlins,
trying to find the gremlins, and like it was really confusing because I would touch the button and it would start reacting. But I think what was happening was anytime I touched the unit and it caused it to wiggle at all, it would start firing. And so I had like the button all tore apart and was like digging into the panel trying to figure out what was going on. And I was like, this looks so clean. Like, where's the chip? Because like the area behind the button was like really clean, surprisingly clean for how dirty the outside is. And there's no gasket anywhere. So I was like, wow, this is like way cleaner than I was expecting it to be, especially with how much I try to blow off the area. I figured something would be back there, but nope, it's perfectly clean.
Those things are so much, like, stupid stuff like that is so hard to diagnose sometimes.
Oh, yeah. I was
like,
just
if you didn't know what that wire was for.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, whenever we were putting it together, Weston was freaking out because he thought I forgot to connect something. I was like, no, that's the foot pedal wire. I figured it out. I said, it must be an option because I've never seen anyone who's ever had one of those with a foot pedal.
My original PCN C1100 came with a foot pedal that didn't work. It was used. The machine was used.
Okay.
And I was always kind of like, well, this would kind of be nice, but then I never, I've never used it, and I never really felt too much desire for it.
I feel like being on the outside of the machine with a foot pedal, that it'd be too easy to step on it in the middle of a program or something else to happen.
I don't think it would let you. But yeah, that would be bad.
So, Yeah. So like that's why I like the the lathe has foot pedals and they're really nice, but they're covered
Mm-hmm.
to where you have to stick your foot into it and then press down. So,
Yeah.
and I don't think that you could probably get that for it, but it looked like a really simple 2-wire one that you could probably connect to anything.
Yeah, you could just put a big button on the outside.
Yeah. But it's fine
again,
where it's at.
why? Because there's a button. Yeah, there's a button in a good spot. I think the only reason it would make sense is if you didn't have a tool changer and
But
you
then why
wanted
have
to
it on
quickly...
the tool changer?
What?
It's on the tool changer.
Yes, but if you just had a power drawbar, the foot pedal would make sense.
Oh,
Because then you could have tool in new hand, grab old tool, press foot pedal, put in new tool, release foot pedal. That's where it makes sense.
It
doesn't make sense for the ATC.
It makes so much sense for that. Like the amount of times that I wish there was a foot pedal whenever I was manually changing everything before I got it, that would have made it so much more sense then.
Did you not buy your machine with an ATC?
I did not.
Oh, wild. I said wild.
Because I was cheap.
Yeah.
I didn't know where I was going with this, and I wanted to get a machine, and I was like, if I get to the point where I need it, I should be able to afford it. So there was a lot of things that were like that with how, like, I've just bought the bare bones basic machine, knowing that I was going to want to add stuff to it as I went. And every time I add something, I go, I'm never going back.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I guess I bought my MX basically for the tool set or the tool changer.
Yeah,
like that was the big thing I wanted.
But it also wasn't your first Tormac.
No, it wasn't.
So
granted, that other one I had was crap, but
yeah, but this was my first CNC I've ever had.
Yeah, that's true. I had 4 or 5 or something before the MX.
Yeah, the most I'd ever had before this point was a Prusa 3D printer.
Yeah.
So, like, I'm very technologically savvy, but I was like, I'm going to start off with the bare bones, and I will figure out what I need as I go.
That's fair. I knew from previous experience, especially with the branding irons, that like tool changer was what I wanted.
Yeah.
I was dying to have a tool changer.
Yeah. And in the beginning, I was like, I can change my tools by hand for $5,000, like, or $6,000, whatever they cost. I was just like, I can change out my own tools for that amount of money. And then as time went on, and now that I have it, I go, I can't.
Yeah.
Nope. That's cheap.
I wonder how many night runs it takes me to pay off $5,000.
Oh, probably not many.
Probably not many.
Because that basically saves you a whole day. So just factor in what you can get done in a day, and then that's what the thing would save you every night run, basically.
I don't remember what I sell the carabiners for now. We raised our prices on them finally.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
What are they selling for now?
I don't remember. Scott raised them. I don't. They're not wildly more. They're a couple bucks more. But basically, our old prices were based on laser cut blanks and not paying for advertising, and so our new prices, just our materials alone are more than double, and then our machining time has like quadrupled, and then also we're paying for advertising. So, and it's a much higher quality product.
How's your material doubled? I thought we did the math on that, and it was going to be the same, if not less.
The old we compared the new style blanks that I was looking at buying compared to the price of milling it from plate. The old style blanks were dirt cheap. They were like $2 each or something.
Oh yeah,
$3. But you had to buy 1,000 at a time to get that.
Yeah.
So now material is like $5 or $6.
Yeah,
and
that makes sense.
Again, we're paying about $10 or $15 to sell each carabiner.
Yeah.
Which we did not build into our original price.
Yeah, you got to build that stuff in, unfortunately.
But our new carabiners are much higher quality than the carabiners we were selling a year ago. So If anything, I think we need to raise our price more still.
Yeah, that's usually how it goes. As your quality goes, you start increasing your prices, which I'd love to at some point. I'm going to buy another carabiner from you and just compare the two so I can have an original compared to the newer one.
I won't.
It's going to happen. It's going to happen at some point because I want to see them.
Yeah, they're definitely getting better. One of the things I've been working on in the background is writing our quality manual and getting a little bit more specific about, this passes, this doesn't.
So let me ask you a question. Does it help you more if people navigate to your website on their own, or does it help the advertising if they click on an ad? Like, I know it probably costs you more for the ad, but does it allow that ad to get shown to someone else at that point? Do they move on?
No, it doesn't make a difference.
Oh, okay.
As soon as you see the ad, it costs us money. It doesn't matter if you click on it or not.
Okay.
And if our advertising is based off people who actually buy the carabiner, so it doesn't matter until you actually hit purchase.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I think I'm running out of things. Trying to think if there's anything else. All right, it's that time of the show.
Our song showed up on the last 2 podcasts.
Oh, yay!
So it at least works sometimes. Sometimes, yeah.
Okay, so some of you might be able to hear the song. Maybe it randomly selects the person who's listening to decide if they can hear the song or not. So, anyways, guys, thanks for hanging out with us this evening, kind of talking about our businesses and what's going on, and hopefully this provides some encouragement, because, it's not all sunshines and rainbows, but we're making it happen, and we appreciate you guys hanging along with us as we continue down our journey. This is Harrison with Precision Ingenuity, signing out with AJ from Design the Everything.
Do you know what I just realized? This song is called Cry When It's Over, which, yes, that choice was intentional. But it's called Cry When It's Over Instrumental Version, which means there's a version of the song with lyrics.
Oh, that'd be interesting.
I need to find that now.
Oh, my.